So first presentation will be by Vipan Prachuabmoh, and she from College Population Studies, Chulalongkorn University, and she will speak about aging in Thailand. Vipan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Scherbov. Good afternoon, สวัสดีค่ะ Today I will talk about aging in Thailand, and my talk will cover three main issues: conventional measure of population aging, new measure of aging, and conclusion and suggestions. Over the past 30 years, scholars and policy analysts have used conventional measures that rely on chronological age to examine trend in Thailand and population aging. According to these conventional measures, Thailand considers one of the world's rapid aging societies. The number of persons ages 60 and older is projected to double between 2015 to 2050. And the share of the population ages 60 and older is about 20% at present, and is projected to constitute 20% by 2050. Thailand will become super aged society within the next 15 years, changing from rank 10 in 2015 to 6 in 2030 among all Asia. Looking at another conventional measures, median age, or the age that divides a population into two equal numerical groups. The median age has been rising sharply from about 18 years old in 1950 to about 40 years at present, and is projected to be nearly 50 years old by the mid of the 21st century. Changing in age structure that are taking place in Thailand translate into changes in dependency ratio defined in terms of age group. The old age dependency ratio has steadily increased since 1990. This measure that fewer younger cohorts to support all adults. Steady decline in the potential support ratio reflects the shrink support base of economic productive persons upon whom older person can depend. Actually, we have been present the trend from this conventional measure over and over again and again and again for the government for over 30 years. Okay, but just recently that government and public seriously concerned about population aging. Recently, Thai government has been giving very serious attention to aging issues. Just past year and just past 2 months, a lot of things have been happening in Thailand. For example, we have the national agenda for aging society. The cabinet just adopted aging society become a national agenda. Another thing that the government just announced is that national strategy. This is the first national strategy of the country. This also includes the issue of aging society, and it also includes in its master plan as well. Besides this, Thailand also have a long-term plan or national plan for older persons, which you can get it from outside there if you're interested about this plan. And actually, these conventional measures do not account for health and social aspects of aging that may impact on well-being and social inclusion of the older person and the nation's sustainable development. Therefore, we need multidimensional approach to better measure and understand the aging process and provide more informed aging policy and programs. Recently, Professor Scherbov and Professor Sanderson have introduced a new way to measure population aging by taking into account of life expectancy instead of chronological age. Prospective age measure how old people, not only from the date of their birth, but also in relation to their lengthening life expectancy. The prospective median age is the median age accounting for the expected remaining year of life. Although the Thai population will grow old, as projected by both conventional and prospective median age, the latter measures shows lower pace of population aging, and female has higher median age due to longer life expectancy. Another new measure is old age threshold, or age when remaining year of life is 15 years or less. According to the graph, someone in 1960 in Thailand is considered old at the age of 62, but by 2020, someone at age 70 would be considered old. And another new measure is the population of the population ages 65 and older that both the age, the threshold age. We can see that this proportion is projected to decrease from 80% in 2000 to 65% in the year 2050. Based on this measure that accounting for increasing life expectancy, so it captured the declining trend in proportion of people with 15 years or less of life remaining at the age of 65. And both conventional and prospective age dependency ratio show the trend of increasing population aging. The prospective old age dependency ratio show slower increase. Conclusion, these new measures seem to offer a ray of hope for successful aging in Thailand. However, healthy, productive, and healthy aging can be happen only on the following condition. The first condition is that Thailand has to make older persons live longer and healthier. At present, it looks like that there is a tendency toward expansion of morbidity and a higher prevalence of disability as life expectancy increases. As you can see, the percentage of populations age 60 and over who have difficulty with ADL have been increased from about 3.7% in the year 2001 to about 6.3% in the year 2016. And you can also see that percent of older persons with with ADL in Thailand has been increased with age. And actually, females seem to live longer and suffer longer with ADL difficulties. And for the projection that has been done by Professor Lloyd Ginger and Professor Potisiri, found that ADL is projected to be more than double between the year 2015 and 2050. Another condition that we need to concern is that Thailand needs to reduce inequality in human capital investments. Different in education attainments are strongly associated with different productive and healthy aging. This is my recent work with Professor Thiravichit Chainan and Professor Nodell. We found that the education of older person has strongly associated with the various dimensions of productive aging. I would like to propose that chronological age represents only one dimension of the population aging. In order to better measure aging, we need measure different characteristics of people. The multi-dimensional measures would provide better information for policy options. To make these multi-dimensional measures more informative in Thailand, we need to collect and disaggregate data on population characteristics such as education attainment, objective health status, includes disability, frailty, chronic condition. I mean, we can also use new technique like biomarker to help on this. And we also need to concern about the area of residence, the differential between those who reside in urban area and rural area. Especially we need to concern more about the urban poor. And we also need to concern about technological literacy and access as well. Moreover, Thailand needs to collect longitudinal data actually we rich of cross-sectional data. We have a series of cross-sectional data, but we lack of good longitudinal data. This data will help us to monitor demographic trend, especially morbidity and mortality, and it also can help us to identify the determinant of older person well-being and productive aging. And the longitudinal data will provide real evidence for future policy formation and evaluation as well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Did you give me a chance to use this slide? Thank you. So our next presenter, well, maybe there is some clarification question. So then we have a second presentation, and our second presenter is Beth Marin, and he is from European Bureau for Policy Consulting and Social Research. And his topic will be dynamically adjusted pension age, coping with age inflation by lifetime indexing in selected Scandinavian and continental EU countries.
Thanks a lot. Don't worry, I will not show more than a quarter of those charts, except in case you doubt what I say. Then I unpack the empirical evidence, but I will not. This is a fallback device for those who have not fallen asleep due to post-prandial fatigue, because within conferences there's always, what is the worst possible time to speak? Just before lunch or just after lunch? Because before lunch, blood sugar level is very low, and after lunch you just nod off. So those who do not nod off and do not believe I have something to show. In case. Well, the title is Dynamic Adjusted Pension Age, and how to cope with what I call age inflation, and the way successfully coping with age inflation I call lifetime indexing. We call it differently. I mean, we have it's the difference between nominal and real age, and this is what Sergei and Warren call chronological age as against prospective age, retrospective, prospective, forward-looking, backward-looking, years lived, life left, whatever we call it. This is our concern. I start when these are the questions I could say no, yes, yes, it depends, it depends, it depends. Last one, yes and no. Very last one, yes. Let's go through this. This is, by the way, the UNECE region, which covers North America, interestingly enough, Canada and the US, Central Asia, Israel in the south, all of the Russian Federation, Turkey, and so on. So this is a large Europe we have been dealing with ever since at the UN. And let me just say my starting point is the second last book I wrote, which is, I don't want to bore you with it, 700 some pages. And it deals with everything I learned on demography. I'm not a demographer, I'm a sociologist, social scientist, economist, but not a demographer. Everything I learned on aging, new concepts, new measures, I learned from IIASA, from Sergei, from Warren, from Wolfgang Lutz. These are my heroes on index. The starting point is this book is called Welfare in an Idle Society ? And it deals with the sustainability or non-sustainability of welfare societies. How much welfare is compatible with how little work? And you could, of course, if you look at adults above the age of 40, most of the further life expectancy is out of paid work. You can make an experiment with it, asking Europeans, the old continent, how old do you feel, for instance? And how long do people feel? Young and old and middle-aged? Interestingly enough, nobody's middle. Everybody's either young or elderly. But old, yeah, the only old person I'm the old guy. But normally people feel young till 41.8, chronological age. as the median age is 40.9, by implication, the majority of the old continent people feels young. Majority feels young. At this median age, the median prospective age of remaining life expectancy is almost about the same than the years already lived. 40 behind, 40 ahead of you, except that it's much better for women. Life is in some areas better for women. For instance, an Austrian woman at the age of 40, in contrast to my grandma, who had a life expectancy at 46 when she was born, and in the 60s, women at the age of 30 had another 46 years. Today, women at the age in Austria, at the age of 40, have another 46 years. This is, twice born, so to speak, reborn. Not bad. At this young age of 40 years, most of the remaining adult life expectancy for women and men is spent out of paid work. Despite the fact that most of the future lifetime, over 90%, is disability-free and healthy. So 90% disability-free and healthy life expectancy, still the majority is not in work. Now you can go through the life years, paid work, non-paid work. I don't bore you. Average time spent in retirement between 15, this is the miserables, if you're 15 years only of life, of pension age, 28 years in countries like, France, Austria, Italy, and so on is the standard. Then you have a middle class bonus, of course. A middle class woman in Vienna has certainly not less than 32, 33 years of additional life expectancy at the time she retires. So, you have class differences, regional differences, and so on. I do not want this. This is what the Austrian example, because it's easier to criticize your own country, so to speak. You see, this is the legal retirement age, men and women, and how it went down, the real retirement age as against the legal retirement age. So, this is how the retirement duration doubled for men from 11 to 22, 23, for women from 16 to 25. So, it did not catch up. Longevity was not matched by slightly increasing retirement age, but just the opposite. The scissors went like this. This year we could do for every single country, how many years do people spend out of paid work? Normally between 20 and 25 years before they start working, another up to 25, 28, whatever years after they retire. And in between, they spent, in Austria for instance, between 13 and 18 years out of work while in working age. And then you can have the reasons, voluntary reasons, involuntary reasons, unemployment, 1.9 years in Austria, people are just unemployed. And so many years in sickness and disability, 10 years of disability, 10.8 years of disability, pension. So this adds up to a lot, and it adds up in the end to between 13 and 18 years while at working age. I do not have, so this is a chart we have done for every single country. This is a timeline in the 70s, and this is a timeline schematized, stylized in the 2010s. And you see people start later, retire earlier, have another 10 plus years of additional life expectancy, and so on. And as we do not want to live shorter, and as we do not want to learn less and have less education, the only thing we can actually do is to change the actual retirement age, which is not being done. Most European is just not being done. And here you see from 43 years of social security contributions, paying taxes, and so on, we are down to 35 years. And from 34 years of dependency, I speak of financial dependency, we are now with 48 plus years, but in fact it's 53, because 5 out of the 35 years we are on the labor market, we don't work. Because we are unemployed, we are on maternity leave, and so on, another 5 years, when we are formally on the labor market, we don't work. So 30 as against 53 years, you don't need a calculator to see that this is not a very balanced. Okay, this is what a counterfactual work-life balance golden age path would have looked like, would have the Trente Glorieuses be continued after 73. They haven't. And here you see the difference. This is what really happened, and this is what should have happened So a little increase in retirement ratio, a little increase in working time, and so on. All of this did not happen. Now, this is, we already mentioned individual versus collective aging. The examples are many, from China to Vienna. Recently, Vienna is rejuvenating. The median age is going down all the time. While every single Viennese gains in longevity. And so if you look individually, we gain life expectancies, not so many as Tyroleans, because they go to the mountains and if they don't fall off, they do good skiing, this adds another 2 or 3 years of life expectancy. We think if you're Vienna, as a collective, Vienna is rejuvenating. As a collective, or as an Austrian, I'm aging collectively. Individually, I have more lifetime. Collectively, I'm aging as an Austrian, but I'm rejuvenating as a Viennese because we have enough immigration from all over the world to make us a younger society. And the median age is going down in so I dropped the rest. Just, again, Sergei, Warren, they have pioneered all of this. I called it a relativity theory of aging. Who is young, who is old? You have either time and space specific neutral definitions which are fixed, or you have a relativity theory. The intuition behind, 5 minutes, okay? The intuition behind is simple. It's not the same if you age at the times of Jesus Christ, or Goethe, or Kant, or Mozart, because Mozart, the life expectancy, Mozart's time was not more than 36. So he didn't die before, quote unquote, his life expectancy at birth would have been. Or the time of Mick Jagger and the Amy Winehouse. So and the same, of course, applies also across countries. Aging in Sierra Leone, in Moldova, Ukraine is different from France. It's so trivial, except nobody takes into account in their calculations this trivia. And technically, this is not translated, this very simple insight and intuition, except for you, nobody did take the effort to translate this into a more sophisticated. Okay, so I have to run. No, then let me. Just to give you an example, I told you about my grandma. The same you could do for the labor market, exit age. 40 years ago, we worked till 62, 66. This would correspond today to a retirement age of 74 and a half. But if we want to discuss 65 and a half, you have people up the walls and, on the barricades and, the Belgians who never had a general strike under Nazi occupation, but they had 2 general strikes within 1 month when the retirement age should have been increased from 58 to 60. Okay, so you see where the passions are and the interests are. Yeah, you have seen all of this, I do not go into this. These are my own indicators. I dropped them because you can read it later on. What my own preferences would be. Two more things. Age inflation and whether immigration is a remedy. Age inflation. Why do we currently age only 2 years within 3 years' time? Over the last decade, you see, for instance, how many days each year life expectancy was gained. In Europe, in China, in North America, and then you could break it down in Europe. Turkey is a champion. Slovenia is very good. Austria, we Austrian men, for instance, gain 101 days each year while we are living. But all of this in Austria is consumed as leisure time. So should I ever live, whatever, 15 more years? I have 1,500 more days, duration of my retirement pension. So you see, this is, and this you can now do why the Slovenians are currently aging only 2 years within 3 years' time, and so on, and what this adds up to in terms of life expectancy. Drop this. Let me come to two last points. First, the differences across European countries. This is Sweden, and the Swedes have done something very reasonable. They have factored in the life expectancy gains into the pensionable age. And you see, somebody born in 1930s could have retired with 65, but somebody born in 73 would have had to work 68 and 3 months to have the same retirement pension as somebody born 20 years earlier and so on. So you have factored this in and you see how much you gain in terms of leisure time, free time, paid non-work, and how much you gain in, and you have to continue working. And I calculated this, about 58% you have to work more from the life expectancy gains, and about 41.9% you gain in additional leisure time in the Swedish model. And here you see working a decade longer basically doubles your pension. This is actuarially fair and reasonable. This is what the Danish do, and I think this is much too rigid. The Danish decided that every additional life expectancy would now go into work. And so if you're born, say, in 67, 71, 73 we had in Sweden, whereas the Swedes would have to work till 68.25, the Danish, with the same cohort, born 1973, would have to work till 70 and a half, which means that the neighboring country would have to work 2.25 years longer than in neighboring Sweden, because they have a more rigid conception that 22 or 23 or 25 years of retirement is enough, and enough is enough, and you shouldn't have more, and whatever you gain is paid out not in money, but not in leisure time, but in money and so. Last point is migration and remedy. Do they give me? I'm time out. Okay, so we will not ever uncover the secret whether migration helps. Yes and no. Partly it helps a lot to buy time, basically, to buy time. But in the end, without very significant labor market and pension reforms, the whole thing will still implode. Thank you.
Now we have next presenter, aging in Malaysia. That is IIASA from the University of Vipan.
I will cover population aging in Malaysia, some policy and population issues and conclusions. But before I go that deeper, I just want to give a glimpse of where Malaysia is. And looking at the census of 2010 and 2020, and for the next census, actually the Malaysian government has already included issues of aging into the census. And if you look at the total fertility rate by ethnicity, because we are a multiracial country, so the ethnicity fertility rate differs, and the lowest will be among the Chinese. And of course, looking at the traditional measure of longevity, there will be a different in terms of age at birth and also at age at 60 in terms of male and female. And in the sense that with the socio-economic development, the nations are living longer. And if you look at the older person age 60 and over in 2015, they can live about from 17 to 23 years, depending on gender and their ethnicity. And then because of the differences in the population issues in Malaysia, you have different interstate-led migration by state. And if you look at this, then you have the highest population in terms of the gain will be in Selangor, and also in Pahang, and also in wilayah Tuan These are all these are all quite a lot of industries in this area, so they attracted a lot of population in that. And then if you look at this, from 1918 to 2010. You have Perak is the highest out-migrated states in Peninsular Malaysia, and because of that, Perak is the highest population aging in Malaysia. Okay, and using the trilogy term age structure change also, because we have the major ethnicity, so So there will be a lot of differences in terms of the population statistics in Malaysia, and we are still using the old conventional definition of age 60 and the old definition of dependency ratio. Because when we talk to the policymakers, even though we as researchers, we use different measures, but in the end they say, give me a figure that we can work, you know. So still you have to relate to them. And in fact, in the month of December, we went for a meeting with the ministry to look at, we have to fix age 60 as the cut-off age for aging. And because it relates to the administrative, how they want to transfer that into services and things like that. So when you talk about that, of course we acknowledge that chronological age is not the age for us to use in terms of researchers, but it is easier for them to administratively monitor or implement policies using that age cut-off. So we had a meeting in December to just agree on the cut-off age, because I use a lot of cut-off age in terms of median and things like that. But they say it's difficult for them, you know, to how do you translate this? Because when you talk about how does it relate to policy, then different age, if you use different cut-off, then it will be quite confusing in terms of implementation for them. So in a sense that that is how we are at this stage. Okay, even though we show them the different perspective of the population aging indicators. Okay, and for the moment, our aging population is about 3 million, and then we're going to go into 4 million, and we're going to double within 26 years from 7% to 50%, just using the cut-off age of 65. So that itself is also confusing to them, because because they follow the UN agreement of age 60 and 15% as the cut-off age of population aging. So this is an issue that we really need to work together with them, so that we can relate and really translate that into the kind of policies that they want to do. So and I'm going to skip this. And another issue that we are facing is that we did spatial distribution of the population, and here I showed you the district, the state of Perak, and it is aging at the different rates. So, and if you look at this, then the main central core of the state of Perak is very aged. If you just use the traditional definition of that, and that shows that they have to change the way they need to do things. And also because Malaysia is also very federal, and the local authorities are not really getting much, not really doing a lot of policy making, because, and we told them they need to change this, because what's happening on the ground is where it should be. And when we discuss this at the ministry level, then they said, how do we play as a central ministry level agency? Because they're so used to, okay, you do this, and then the state takes over. So when we did the SDG for Malaysia, they were saying, so how do we then relate to the central agency, the federal regulation and the state, and empowering the local government, because the local government has very little money in that sense. So it's always from the federal perspective of doing things. But then there is also this issue of, in the national plan, there was an issue of empowering the local authorities to design programs for the population at large in the community. So they are still grappling with how do we do that when we only have money for rates for, we charge rates for garbage and things like that, not beyond developing social services for the community. So there's still thinking process of how we should do that, because at the national planning level, they want the local government to do it. So, and I mentioned this happening in the near future, because as Thailand they did a transformation of delivering services into the local level. So the funding issue is another issue that we need to talk about. And if you look at Selangor state, it is the richest state in Malaysia, but if you look at the population in terms of aging, it's not very high. But the absolute number in Selangor is higher than in Perak. So that's the issue of absolute number and also the percentage of the aging population when you talk about bridging the demography and also the policies and services that should be done at the local level. So I'm not going to go through this. And we know that in Malaysia, because of the different states and the different levels of development, the uneven distribution, uneven development of the country, you have different population size, but you look at the different GDP, state GDP, meaning that it'll be a lot more difficult for the low-income state to cater for the aging population, and because there is this distribution issue of what should and what amount of it to be spent on the different population sector. This is the normal median, and if you look at the different states, the median age is different. We have, they are all different. So in a sense that then the whole infrastructure has changed in terms of the thinking population, thinking perspective of aging. And we also have the rural-urban divide in terms of population aging. And if you look at the development areas, 70% of Malaysia is already urban. So these are some of the issues that we are facing. I'm not going to go through this. And if you look at the other issues that I showed here, is looking at two important issues in the aging perspective, is in terms of finance and also about health. And if you look at the HUS statistics in terms of level of B40, M40 and T20, household without older person and household with older person, there is a different percentages about that. Okay, and also looking at the health expenditure for Malaysia, we have two tiers, the private and public, and if you look at the private, the 78% of the private spending, the spending is by household with out-of-pocket, and 84% of public spending is by the Ministry of Health. So we are basically providing near universal health for the population. I'm not going to treat this, and okay, putting things together then, what we have done, within the income and also the health perspective, we created a matrix of older person, and then less than 5% of older person using the matrix, mixing of matrix of income and also health. Less than 5% of the older person needs welfare approach of doing things. And then 8.5% of the population are poor, but they are still able. So in the sense that in thinking about programs and planning, you need affordable services. And then we have 26% of the people who are not poor, but able. So we need income generating programs, and we have over 61% of the aged population has the potential to contribute to society. In the sense that even though it's not a measurement of aging, but we combine the health and also the income aspect of it to create this typology, and it just shows the government that, of course, we all know that we can't have one-size-fits-all policy, but with this typology that we've developed for the government, they are now changing their approach to developmental perspective of devising programs. So because it's very difficult actually to convince for the government to change the approach of doing things. So with this figure, they are now looking at developmental perspective of providing services. So the key conclusion is that by any measure, older Malaysian is increasing in absolute numbers and proportion, and of course looking at life expense. see, but the real driver of population aging is the rapidly declining birth rates. And there are wider variations in the rate of aging by sex, ethnicity, and geography. Older persons are asset rich, but they are cash poor or income poor. Disease and mortality patterns are changing, but health expenditure is still a relatively new concern, as it coincides with calls for systematic reforms from the H&S and like to provide privatization. And now we have the new insurance scheme, which we would see as risk pooling. And healthcare and social welfare system in Malaysia are facing novel challenges, but the changing demographics are also bringing new opportunities. And we need to rethink how demographic indicators of population are useful for evidence-based policy planning, so more as in the aid of as in the age classification, especially for the old and the B40s. And we also have the ASEAN-wide research network on aging that we will be working on demography for at least the next 2 years. So thank you.
Our next presenter is Silvia Giorgiuli, and she's from Mexico, and she's going to talk about aging in Latin America, heterogeneous timing, and implications.
Thank you very much. I would also like to thank Sergei and Stephanie from IIASA, the UN Population Mission ESCAP, and Chulalongkorn University for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm convinced that we always gain from sharing experiences. So in my case, I'm going to talk about population dynamics in Latin America. I think that one thing that characterizes Latin America is the heterogeneity in the timing of the transitions, demographic transitions, and at the same time, these trends toward demographic convergence. I'm going to look at 3 cases. Each of them illustrates different processes of how the demographic transition is occurring in Latin America. And at the same time, each of these cases, and I will talk a little bit at the end about that, are related to different welfare regimes or social security regimes within the region. So, as we have seen for other regions, Latin America also experienced a very fast decrease in fertility rates, and especially the second half of the last century, and large gains in life expectancy, again in the second half of the last century. These led to, by this very well synthesized in this graph, we have already reached the highest point in terms of the 0 to 19 years of age population. The population 16 years and over is the one that is growing the fastest, and by 2050, there will be more people 60 years and over than 0 to 19 within the region. Although this is a general trend, and for all countries, it's sort of the same. They have already reached, or they are about to reach, the highest peak of the younger population, and the 60 years and over population is the one that is growing the fastest. The scenario looks different depending on the country. And that has to do also with the starting point. If we look at 1950, the 3 case countries that I am using for this presentation, well, you can see that Guatemala fertility and Mexico had fertility rates close to 7 in 1950. In Mexico, the decrease was faster than in Guatemala, and Uruguay already had very low fertility for its time in 1950. And you also see large differences in life expectancy also from this starting point around the 50s. 25 years of difference between Guatemala and Uruguay, which sort of illustrates very, very nice the heterogeneity within the region. But at the same time, this table shows the trend towards convergence. No? When you look at 2050, fertility rates are supposed to be are expected to be around the same, and there will also be shorter gaps in terms of life expectancy. So it's heterogeneous trajectories, but trend towards convergence at the end. Because the starting points are different, so the history also, the things of the timing and the way the aging process is occurring is different. No? When you look at Guatemala, for example, within the 1950-2050 framework, so the population 60 years and over is the one that will be growing the fastest, but it will still be below in terms of the other age groups. When you look at Uruguay, by the year 2050, the population 60 and over will be the largest age group compared to the other ones, and Mexico is sort of in between. You know? So, as a result of these different timings in age, at these different timings, we also have differences in the trends in terms of the age dependency ratio. Let's talk about the demographic dividend. So one of the main discussions around demographic trends in Latin America right now is related to the demographic dividend, because for most of the countries in the region, they are experiences the lowest dependency rates expected in their historical times. This is for the whole Latin America, and if you look at it, between 2020 and 2030, 35 is when we are talking about these demographic dividends and the lowest dependency ratios, and afterwards an increased view or driven by the increase in the old age dependency ratio. When you look at it again by country, something that is interesting is that Uruguay, for example, never really experienced a demographic dividend. No? It's the light blue line, while Mexico is right now going through this point of the demographic dividend with the lowest dependency ratios, and Guatemala will be experiencing the dividends in the next 2 decades, to say it in a way. When one uses the old age dependency ratios and the prospective old age dependency ratios, the scenario is a little bit different. So in a way, one of the discussions that we're having in Latin America right now is whether the demographic dividend has been already wasted, or whether we can still seize part of the demographic dividend. And I think that one of the gains of using these alternative measures, the prospective old age dependency ratio, is that it gives us, as it delays aging, it gave us a broader framework to talk about the possibility of seizing the demographic dividend if we look at it in this way. And there are 2 reasons, I'm going to illustrate 2 reasons why I do think that we also need to move forward, as has been mentioned in the prior presentations and in the prior panels, towards looking to more specific characteristics of this aging process in Latin America. One has to do with the growth rates by different age groups. As expected, the population 0 to 14 is already decreasing, has a negative population growth rate. The growth rate for the population in general is decreasing. But for the population 60 to 74 and 74 and over, it's growing faster. It's going to be, as I mentioned, the age groups that will be growing the fastest, but with differences. No? So that in the next 2 decades, the population 74 and more will be the one that will be growing the fastest all the way up to the 2050. So I think this is the kind of information that we also need to disentangle to understand better the aging process, even that the needs are different depending on each age group. The other issue has to do with labor participation rates after age 60. So one of the characteristics of Latin America is the high prevalence of informal labor markets. For Guatemala and Mexico, it's about 55% of the population, working population, is in the labor market, which implies that most of them will not have any possibility of pension systems. And that is an incentive for labor participation rates to stay high even after age 60. In this graph, I am showing the average for all Latin America, and as you can see, at age 60 to 64 for men, it's expected to be around 70%, and even at age 70 to 74, it's expected to be around 40%. And I mean, the question to be raised or to be explored is to what extent this is due to better health conditions, and to what extent this is due because there are no other alternatives. In fact, the working population participating in informal activities is even higher after age 60. You can also see a large difference between men and women labor participation rates. Something that has happened in Latin America is that female labor participation rates grow very fast in the 80s and 90s, and a little bit at the beginning of this century, but then for many of the countries it sort of stagnates and remains low. So what you are seeing, it's also sort of a reflection of what's happening in the earlier stages in the life course. When we look at it with by country, again, we do see very important and significant differences, and it has to do with Uruguay has a universal social security system with a large proportion of population that has access to pensions and to health services. In Mexico, it's a dual benefit system. The population related to the formal labor market does have access to a pension system and to health care. And in the case of Guatemala, it's not universal. It can be characterized as a very weak institutional setting. And that sort of reflects when one looks at the trends of working participation after age 60, and all the way, I cut it here at age 70 to 74, but you can see that even for Guatemala, the proportion of population 7 to 74 men working is 65. And this brings me to one of my you can see the basic grammar. And this brings me to what will be my concluding remarks that have to do that I think that Latin America opens the opportunity to think about the links on one side of the demographic dividend and the other, on the other side, the aging process. To the end, what happens to this specific stage that we are living of the demographic dividend will determine to a large extent what will happen with aging in the next decades. We have three main challenges in terms, I always tend to be optimistic and think that we have not wasted demographic dividend and things can still be done in terms of seizing it. One has to do with the human capital investment. One of the characteristics of the region is that the ag coverage has increased a lot and educational attainment has increased, but there are large gaps in terms of the quality of education. For example, coverage has increased via long-distance learning, which creates large differences, for example, in terms of educational achievement with general education. The characteristics of the labor market, and here as I refer, one of the main challenges has to do with the large prevalence of informal market activities, and on the other side, a very weak care system and pension system. And I will close saying that one of the things that will be characterizing the trends of aging within the next decades in Latin America has to do with what some people have called the educational transition in the region. We expect to have a large increase in upper secondary and post-secondary education, but again with large differences within countries. Although we will find this trend in all countries, when you separate, again, Guatemala is still remaining behind, and Mexico and Uruguay will be doing better, but that's something that is the trend, but again, it has to consider that there are large differences in terms of the quality of education. So this is sort of like a broad picture of the aging process and the link to the whole demographic dynamics in Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we can open for questions, comments. So please introduce yourself. What's the question? Maybe it's good if you are addressed to a particular presenter or okay. So floor is open. I think we got to the left. Yes.
The speakers mentioned the importance of human capital investment. I think almost everyone. And I'm really keen today and tomorrow to see what is a couple of issues where either there's already really good evidence reviews on what can be done and generalizable, or where we need to commission one. And certainly there must be quite a bit of evidence on lifelong learning, but perhaps we need to update that. And I'm interested to hear your perspectives on, for human capital investment in education, where is an evidence gap or where is the best evidence? Because we'd like to highlight it in this baseline report for healthy aging in about a year and a half. Thank you.
One more question.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. One for that, really, I would like to hear a little bit about migration. Hi, I've got a couple of questions. One for Bernd, I would like to hear a little bit about migration, immigration, and aging. And then I would add to Rita, who did talk all about human capital. I would like to talk a little bit about social capital, particularly in contexts like Malaysia and Thailand. And if Tenko and Vipan could reflect on that and how that could be used in addressing older people needs within the context of large younger population as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's start.
I think in terms of human capital investment is very important, especially in the era of technological disruption, because otherwise we will have exclude older person from many things. For example, in Thailand right now, we see a gap in terms of the accessment to the advanced technology. So I think that lifelong learning is very important. Actually, right now, government has implemented a lot of policy and program. But one thing that I'm really concerned is that it has no evaluation. Just implement things, but we don't know which one is the good options. So actually, when we use a new measure on population aging, actually it sees something that is not doomsday for Thailand. We still have a chance to improve something, but things that human capital investment is very crucial one, because now we have really inequality in terms of getting to good education. So if people live longer and want to be more healthier and happier and productive aging, so the crucial one is human capital. And another thing you asked me about social capital in Thailand. Actually now, according to the national strategy, we try to invest more in terms of strengthening community. Because right now we have really low fertility. We cannot rely on family alone because we have very few number of adult children. So we try to strengthen community, and we try to use the social capital that we have in terms of volunteers to help, especially for the health system and for the social well-being of the workers.
Wolfgang, why are people looking so desperately for something not good for them? We could find other things, no? Very seriously, I'm not sure whether this is true, because so many countries this does not apply. It does not apply to Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Scandinavian countries. It does not apply to the UK, who raised the retirement age from 65 to 68. And Tony Blair was re-elected on that thing. The Spanish socialists have been re-elected a long time ago while raising the retirement age. So we have a group of countries where this works, where people can be enlightened, if you wish so, communicated by their leaders, and others who are stubbornly resisting this, especially in continental Europe, France, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, Austria, and so on. Not Switzerland. So there are clusters of countries, first thing. The second thing is, why do people eat sugar and fat at the same time? While it kills them, and they still do, and with great pleasure. And there are lots of other addictions which may come to our minds where people are just. So long periods of, whether it's healthy to be 33 years in retirement is debatable. I don't think so, you know. I'd rather do with my dad, who worked till his 93rd year, and it kept him young and alive, and you know. So, but people have, it's easy to say if you're on the sunny side of life and not on the dark side of life. But I think we should think about the people who are on the shadowy dark side of life as well, in the labor market, and there I can understand. But those who propagate not working longer, and the third dimension is a gender dimension. The gender dimension is that while men actually suffer from retiring early, and we have all this evidence empirically, how many months in terms of lifetime it costs you to retire so many years earlier, because you drink more and then you drive drunkenly. You know, the endless list of things why people kill themselves early, prematurely. Men, women don't. Women are, whatever, better off. And they don't, for them it's not a disadvantage. It's like, it's different with drinking red wine, you know. This is supposedly better for men than for women. So we have gender-specific benefits and costs to all kinds of habits. And okay, last thing is migration. Migration, well, this is the natural population grows and the overall population grows. And if the red line is above the blue one, you have immigration country, and if you have the blue one above you have an emigration country. And basically it shows that if you go through these countries, you see that countries who are rich, like Belgium, like Canada, like Austria since the 60s, attract people, and so they become immigration countries. And as long as they have been poor, like immediately after the war, they have been emigration countries. In the interwar period, they have been, and so on. And so you could go through these charts in small multiples through all the 56 countries of the UN European region. But basically, also immigration, as the people who immigrate are younger than those who, the expats who emigrate. You see this very clearly in the case of Austria. So even immigration adds additionally to the rejuvenation of society. So if you then look at the share of foreign population, you see, you know, this is differs quite a lot. Here you see the dynamics just of the refugee movement in one country, and you see that some countries are magnets of refugee movements like Sweden, Austria, and Germany. They themselves have many times the EU average in terms of attracting migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, to their country than, say, France, UK, Italy, and so on. But the term the UN has invented, the replacement migration, I think is an important thing. How much immigration does a country need to reach certain goals? And let's think of three goals. One is, I want to have the population, resident population, not the non-resident population, not your non-resident population, not the tourists, those who are residents, whether they are naturalized and citizens or not. The resident population constant. And there, for instance, in the Austrian case, this, by the way, was done by a geographer who is now the Minister of Education. As long as he was a scholar, he was saying different things than today. And the Chancellor, he was advising better saying very different. For instance, we need migration. Nowadays, they launch election campaigns on closing the borders. But anyway, so he was calculating the number of inhabitants to, or to keep the stable number of inhabitants, we basically need 21,600 net immigration, more immigration over emigration a year, which is almost the same figure we had over the last half a century. So basically you do what you did over the last 50 years and everything will be okay in terms of stabilizing the, but the working age population will go down by 700,000 to 1 million people. And so when we have the same number of inhabitants, they are not available for the labor market any longer. So in order to keep the working age population constant, you would need 44,000 net, a saldo, immigration minus emigration, which means basically doubling the immigration rate. If you want to keep the old age dependency ratio, once I use it because it's such an absurd the old age dependency ratio, we would have needed 118,000, which is 5 times the net immigration rate till next year. And we would basically multiply by 10 the number of immigrants we had over the last 50 years by 10. And you have seen what happens not just electorally, if xenophobia and all kinds of racism and that start to prevail in the political arena. To keep this constant would basically mean 10 times. Okay, this would basically not work, which shows the replacement migration can never do it alone. We have a continued necessity of a stable immigration to compensate for natural population decline, shrinking labor market supply, and so on and so on. But we still have great reform requirements on the labor market and consolidating the pension systems. Alone, the demographic change and transformation cannot alone be compensated by immigration. What to do with migration policies? I would think basically 3 things. You differentiate between asylum seeking and immigration policies. For instance, in Austria, over the last couple of years, we had 86% of immigration not through the labor market, but through everything else. Marriage market, family reunification, and many things, but not, okay, this of course is a problem, kinship, chain migration, and so on. And we would need more third country immigration, because the same problem applies to all EU countries from an EU point of view. It doesn't work, within the EU because they are competing for the same quote-unquote migrants. So they need third country migration at a much larger scale than we would be willing to confess politically. But I think it's time to speak truth to power. Okay. And the last thing is you have full cost sharing of all cooperation expenses. You do not have only to subsidize Turkey, Lebanon, Jordania, Libya, Maghreb countries, but also within Europe, those countries who have an overproportionate share of the burden, I think would be fair enough, and it would shut up those who play very nasty political games on those issues. So, sorry.
I just want to make it pretty clear that I think this replacement migration gave for Europe something like 500 million people should be arriving to Europe to keep all the administration constant. And that's simply because migrants also becoming old. Every year, yes. No, not every year.
Just by time.
Yes, but they're becoming older. That's why you have to have more and more.
Okay, let me answer in terms of human capital and investment in education. And what I see now is that we have the programs, but we don't have evaluation data on that. And probably when you talk about, we can see that education is a protective factor for aging. But the data that we need to show that it is a protective factor, I'm not sure whether it is available openly or we do evaluation of that. But we know that lifelong learning has been implemented all over the country. So I think we need to look at the evaluation aspect of it and the impact of the program. And in terms of social capital, in terms of addressing the needs of the person, there are efforts in terms of productive aging and also doing volunteerism. But I think it is also bind by culture, because not many older persons who are willing to do volunteer work, they want to work, but the family says you shouldn't be in that volunteerism cycle because it's sort of shameful, like as if the adult children are not taking care enough of you. So I think there is a need from the older person perspective to be out of the house, but there's also this cultural barrier that are interplaying with the involvement of the older person in that perspective. But if you look at when we did a survey in terms of working after retirement, the older person wants to work to do meaningful things, but the only thing is that barrier. So I think when you mentioned whether we should what they call commission things like that, I'm not very sure, but there are data around that we can look at it in that perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, so in the case of Latin America, we're speaking about the first dividend, No? Probably not Uruguay, Argentina, Cuba. That would be different. But for most of Latin America, it's the first dividend. And at least, for example, for the case of Mexico, when you think that the lowest dependency ratios will be around the year 2030, there is this idea that it has been wasted. And of course, that human capital is the main axis, and there has to be this emphasis on the human capital and the investment in the young generations. But when you have also already a very large bulge of population, which is 30 to 45, and it's still in its productive years, and it is still part of the demographic dividend, then is when I think that it's even more important to talk about lifelong education. And yeah, always the economic scenario is very uncertain even today for most part of the region, unfortunately. But I would also like to talk a little bit about human capital investment and what has been called by ESCAP the gender dividend. No? There's a potential in terms of increasing the female labor force participation rates, which is important for aging, because we do know that one of the reasons older women are in a more vulnerable situation has to do with the fact that they were never part of the formal labor market, so they don't have access to some of the health systems and pensions. The other thing I wanted to talk was about the labor market. I think that we need to look more in detail what is happening in the labor market during the old years and how that will have an impact also in aging. In the case of Latin America, we know not only that there's a high prevalence of the informal sector, but that even within the formal sector, there's a lot of rotation. There are many short periods where workers are out of the labor market, and that does have an impact later in the conditions when they decide to retire. And finally, I do want to make a remark on international migration from the perspective of the countries of origin, which has a different meaning. In the case of Mexico, by the year 2000, 18% of the working age population was living in the US. So of course that does have an impact in terms of the dependency ratio. Some Mexican demographers said that the demographic dividend has been seized in the US and not in Mexico, if you consider that very high proportion. But now we are experiencing this recent return migration, which has different characteristics. One part of the return migration is migrants that are becoming of age, are 60 years and older. Many of them do not have, because they were undocumented in the US, they don't have any pension or access to health system. They are coming back to Mexico with the diseases that need to be taken care of. Many of them, for example, need dialysis or have diabetes, and they do not know, they have been out of Mexico for 10, 15, 20 years, so they do not know how to move in the Mexican health system, and they do not have access to the health system. The Mexican government decided to give them access for 90 days, 3 months. So the issue is what happens afterwards. And on the other side, you also have this return migration of young people, which in terms of, or adults, which in terms of aging is also a challenge in terms of how they integrate into the labor market. And this recent flow of return migration has posed, again, the discussion around the portability of Social Security, and to what extent what migrants did on the countries of destination can be transferred to the countries of origin when they come, when they retire. And I do think that the perspective regarding international migration looks different, and aging looks different depending on where you're standing.
Thanks. I may also add a little bit again on migration, that there was a work in Cambridge, I don't remember the name of the researcher, when they showed that basically migration doesn't help you to solve the issue of economic dependency. Labor force participation rates, increasing labor force participation, that what will change. And actually, some time ago, Warren and I did a paper about the trade-off between old age, about the labor force participation rates and age of retirement. And it showed that actually age of retirement, labor force participation rates is probably a better mechanism, because it might be more acceptable by the majority of the population than postponing age of retirement. And there was also a question to in this perspective measure people regarding how governments accept that, right? So I think that was already answered partly by them. that some governments do accept this new vision, some governments simply do not. And we had during the lunch, we had some nice conversation where they suggested that, well, maybe it's done on purpose. You know, maybe just, you know, to show, to overestimate the issue, and just to get some additional funding, and, you know, to show that the issue is so bad, things are so bad that, you know, you cannot manage something. Maybe more of this, some comments. Because I'm talking all the day. Can you give?
It takes a while to learn about perspective age. For many of you in this conference, this is perhaps the first time you've ever heard this term. So I think it will take a while to educate policymakers. First of all, we have to educate teachers, we have to teach people in school, there has to be a new generation. But since perspective age is so natural, we all think that 60-year-olds today are not like 60-year-olds 50 years ago. Eventually, they will do something like this, but it will take a while.
Okay. So we can still have questions, short questions.
Yeah. My name is Vanessa Steinmeier from the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific here in Bangkok. It's more of a comment. The prospective retirement age is a very interesting concept, and it's very interesting to look at it. Now, no doubt, and maybe we can look at it as an additional measure. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of Asia and the Pacific, and now countries are gradually noticing that they have to do something about the rights of older persons, that their populations are aging as a whole, so they need to adopt some policies. If we tell them now, oh, most of their population is actually not old, they are just 60. Actually, you have a young population. My concern is that they still don't do anything. Then about the question, why do people want to retire if it's not good for them? Might be a very good point in Europe. Most of us, your and my job, yeah, hopefully we can continue for a much longer time. But if we look at the world of labor here in Asia, a lot of jobs are still hazardous. There are still a lot of manual labor, and they're not protected. Even a lot of people risk their lives on a daily basis just going to work. So I think before we address this, we change the nature of jobs and the nature of labor. We cannot say it's not good for you. Number two, actually, coverage of pensions or contributory pensions is very low. So most of the people cannot retire. So in this region, we rather still have to talk about the right of the to retire at one point. What we can debate is a mandatory retirement age, but for many people, retirement here in the region is something far away. So I think we still have to make, when we discuss these issues, we do have to make a difference of the development stages countries are in. Thank you.
Answer to the last interventions. May I recall, I don't know what you think in terms of mandatory retirement age, but the MIPA, the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, on which I worked before it was put into operation, ever since all these ministerial conferences, explicitly rules out forced retirement as this is violating human rights. So how can we have mandatory retirement if we force some people at a fixed threshold, if it's 60, 55, whatever, to get out of the arena? I think this is, you made many important points which we agree, except that, yes, there are, and basically you said it undermines our efforts to get basic social rights and human rights implemented into our country, so that's why we need to kind of maintain this very problematic concept. And I think the truth is something which is always healthy, and healthier than fiddling with. You know, the truth is that a person, even you learned it today, you know, a Thai person today, age 62, is different from the one just one generation behind it, which was very, very steep actually, the increases in. So I think we should have the double track kind of strategy, both promoting the issues you were kind of advocating, but at the same time not fooling ourselves and others in what the implications are, because you know, as one of the inventors of the third wave, you know, once formulated, the world doesn't owe us a living, and we, in order all this welfare, we must be earned by somebody, and if the majority of the population is out of work, it doesn't pay taxes and contributions, how could we ever maintain decades of unpaid non-work, of paid non-work for an ever-increasing share of the population? I think this is a very real problem, and that I think we have to face it, and I think in a way which is sustainable. And whether it's in advanced countries or less advanced countries, very, very, very few. I can count them on the fingers of one hand, who now have stable systems and sustainable systems in the sense that blindly we can rely on that in Sweden in 2222 people will still have a pension which the purchasing power behind is equivalent to what people got 1 or 2 generations ago. This is very, very rare birds, very rare birds on the globe. And I think we should multiply them instead of, okay.
Very briefly, in the case of Latin America, for me it's not so clear that in the short term we will have an increase in terms of the elder people that have access to pension. No? Or I think that I've already mentioned the problems with the labor characteristics of the labor market, and I don't think there's any expectation that it will change in the short term. But there are 2 things that I think are important to consider aside from pensions. On one side, for example, the Mexican government is starting with this very assertive conditional cash transfer program. And at first they say that it will be for population 60 and over. So I do think that an approach that has a lot of perspective on the age is important in terms of defining at what age older people can benefit from this program. And on the other side, talking about what elderly people do. Recently, again in Mexico City, in Mexico as a country, there was this reduction on the investment on childcare, and the government uses one of the arguments, well, grandparents can take care of children, right? So it's also this idea of how the care system works and who cares for whom. And in countries where most of the responsibility of care goes to the families, that's an issue to think about when we talk about aging with this new perspective.
About the retirement age, actually when you, in Malaysia, if you look at the labor law, there is no such thing as retirement age. But when you enter into a workforce, there is the agreement between employer and employee, that is the one that sets the retirement age. So that is a constant negotiation that we need to do, and they are changing, but it is very slow to change because it ties in also with the benefit. For example, like the EPF, we have changed the retirement age to 60, but the population still wants to withdraw lump sum at age 55, and we know that the money will not last for very long. So there is the issue of is this my money? Why do you bother? But if they take out and they don't have the money, why didn't you control me? That is kind of issue that we are facing right now in Malaysia, and I think there is a need for us to really look at how do we measure or how do we quote unquote quantify the productive aging aspect of it, so that we can we can convince that the government, even because when we did this group of retirees, we quantify their activities, and for the people that is age 60 to 69, they contribute several millions in terms of productive activities in taking care of the grandchildren, also in meaningful activities, volunteer work and things like that. So when we show those kind of figures, then at least it has a meaning to the government. Because we did it through the retirement fund for the government officers. So we did quantify that, so at least they know that, okay, these people are the ones that we want to invest in, so that they have a return in terms of the share of social responsibility to the community.
I think we have to round up our session because we're already 5 minutes behind the schedule. So I want to thank all speakers, and this way we conclude our session. Thank you.